The old space station drifted slowly around a silent planet. Its lights flickered weakly, like dying stars in a black sea. Most of its systems were broken, and the sound of air circulation was the only sign of life left inside. In a small room near the station's center, a woman sat on the cold metal floor. Her skin shimmered faintly with emerald light, and her hair fell like threads of silver over her shoulders. She was Alira, one of the ancient alien race called the Valyrians. She had once lived among her people with honor and pride, but now she was in exile. Alira placed her hand gently on her belly. A soft glow pulsed under her palm, proof that a new life still lived inside her. Her people had called it a crime. They said she was too old to bear a child. They said her pregnancy was a shame that would bring dishonor to their kind. So they cast her out, left her on this abandoned space station to die alone. Every day, she counted the hours by the slow blinking of a broken console light. She spoke to her unborn child to keep herself sane. Her voice was calm but tired. "My little star," she whispered. "Don't be afraid. We will see the light again." But she knew her oxygen supply was failing, her food nearly gone. Sometimes she closed her eyes and wished for an ending, but she couldn't give up. Not yet. Then, one day, a weak signal appeared on the screen. Alira blinked in surprise, the symbol flashing red and white. At first, she thought it was a dream or another malfunction. Then a voice came through, static-filled, deep, and human. "This is Engineer Mason Holt, Terran Fleet Outpost Line. I'm reading a faint distress beacon. Is anyone alive out there?" Her heart almost stopped. A human voice. She hadn't heard a voice in months. Her shaking fingers reached for the comm switch. This is Alira of Valyria," she said weakly. "I am alone. I need help." There was a pause, then his voice again, firmer now. "Hold tight. I'm coming to you." Within an hour, a small shuttle locked onto the outer hatch. Steam hissed as the airlock door opened, and a man stepped inside. He wore a dark repair suit covered in patches of grease. His eyes were sharp but kind, the kind that looked at people instead of judging them. When Mason saw her, he froze. You're not human," he whispered. Alira lowered her eyes. "No, I am not. That is why no one came." He looked around the ruined room. The flickering lights, the broken heater, the half-empty food packs. He saw the roundness of her belly, the weakness in her breathing. And in that moment, he didn't see an alien. He saw a person, alone and afraid. "I can fix this," Mason said, kneeling beside her. "You need warmth, air, food. I can help." She shook her head slowly. "Your people will not allow it. They will fear me." He gave a small smile. "Maybe, but I don't take orders from fear." He removed his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. The warmth shocked her. She hadn't felt human touch in so long. "You are helping me," she whispered. "Yeah," he said softly, "because someone should have long ago." He helped her to her feet, guiding her toward the shuttle. The engines hummed like a heartbeat. As they lifted away from the dying station, she looked through the window one last time. Her old life vanished behind her, nothing but cold stars and silence. For the first time in months, she felt hope. But somewhere deep in the void, machines were already tracking them. Her people's patrols had noticed the activation of her beacon. They would come, not to save her, but to punish whoever dared to help her. Alira rested her head against the seat and closed her eyes. Mason adjusted the controls, unaware of what danger was waiting. 2 lives, 1 human and 1 alien, now bound by a single act of kindness. And far beyond the stars, destiny began to turn its wheels. The story of an exiled mother, and the human who refused to let her die, was just beginning. The small human shuttle cut through the darkness of space like a silent arrow. Inside, the air smelled faintly of oil and recycled oxygen, but to Alira, it felt like paradise. For the first time in months, she could breathe without fear. The hum of the engines sounded like a lullaby to her tired heart. Mason checked the control board again, eyes moving across the flickering holographic maps. He knew the Valyrian sector was dangerous, but he couldn't leave her behind. The distress beacon would have been picked up by someone. Maybe by her people, maybe by worse. "We need to stay off the main grid," he muttered, adjusting the coordinates manually. Alira sat quietly behind him, her silver hair falling over her face. She still could not understand why this human had helped her. Her kind had always believed humans were primitive, selfish, ruled by emotion rather than logic. And yet this man had risked everything for a stranger. "Where are you taking me?" she asked softly. "Somewhere safe," he said, not looking back. "There's an old mining outpost near the asteroid belt. No patrols go there anymore." She nodded slowly, though fear still clouded her mind. Her people did not forgive exile, and if they found her alive, they would make her suffering worse. Hours passed in silence. Outside the window, stars drifted like glowing seeds in the black void. Mason offered her a ration pack, but she hesitated before taking it. He smiled slightly. "It's safe, just food. No tricks." "I know," she whispered. "I just forgot what kindness feels like." He sat across from her, his face illuminated by the blue lights of the shuttle. "Why would they do that to you?" he asked quietly. "You're carrying life, not death." Alira looked down, her fingers tracing the metal seat. "My people believe that after a certain cycle, a female should not bear a child. They call it unnatural, impure." "That's cruel," Mason said, his tone firm. "No law should punish a mother." She looked at him, her eyes shimmering with something between pain and disbelief. "You speak as if you understand." "I don't have to understand," he said. "I just know it's wrong." Her heart softened a little. There was something strange about him, not just bravery, but warmth. He treated her as if she wasn't a monster. For the first time, she felt seen. Suddenly, the control panel beeped sharply. Mason turned. Red warnings flashed across the screen. "Damn it. Valyrian patrols," he said. "They must have tracked your signal." Alira gasped, gripping the seat. "They will destroy us. They don't show mercy." "Then they'll have to catch me first," Mason said, pulling the throttle. The shuttle roared forward, engines straining. Outside, two silver ships emerged from the shadows, sleek and sharp like hunting blades. Bolts of plasma fire streaked across the void, missing by inches. Mason twisted the shuttle through debris, the ship shaking violently. "Hold on," he shouted. Alira's heart pounded, the stress painful for her unborn child. Mason noticed her trembling and pushed the ship harder, using asteroid fragments as cover. After several tense minutes, the radar finally went clear. The patrols turned away, losing their trace. Mason exhaled slowly, wiping sweat from his brow. "Looks like they don't know this region well," he said. "We're safe, for now." Alira closed her eyes, whispering a prayer in her native tongue. Mason looked back at her, his gaze softening. "You all right?" "Yes," she breathed. "Because of you." He smiled faintly, but inside, he was thinking of what he had just done. Helping an alien exile meant breaking Terran law too. Harboring her could cost him his career, maybe even his freedom. But when he looked at her, weak but strong, afraid yet full of life, he knew he couldn't stop now. They reached the mining outpost, a cluster of metal domes clinging to an asteroid. Inside, it was dusty, quiet, and forgotten. Perfect for hiding. Mason carried her to a small cot and started repairing the oxygen filters. The faint hum of the machinery filled the room. Alira watched him silently, her hand resting on her belly. "Why do you help me, Mason Holt?" she asked softly. He paused, tightening a screw. "Because everyone deserves a chance to live," he said simply. She smiled faintly, her eyes glimmering like starlight. "And maybe," he added quietly, "because I was tired of fixing machines. Maybe it's time I fixed something that truly mattered." Outside, space was silent, but somewhere far beyond, new orders were being sent. The Valyrian fleet had marked her rescue as a violation, and the name Mason Holt was now recorded on their watch list. Their journey had only begun, and fate was already watching. The mining outpost was silent, surrounded by an endless ocean of stars. Its metal walls creaked with age, and dust floated like silver mist in the low gravity. For Mason Holt, it was the perfect hiding place, but for Alira, it was another cage, only colder, quieter, lonelier. Mason spent hours repairing the oxygen systems, patching the power core, and sealing air leaks. Each spark from his welding torch painted his face with brief flashes of blue light. Alira watched him work from her cot, her hands resting gently over her stomach. She was weaker now, the child inside her drawing energy she barely had. But every time she saw Mason move, calm, steady, focused, something inside her found strength again. One evening, When the engines finally hummed to life, she whispered softly, "You could have left me at the station and gone home. Why didn't you?" Mason didn't look up, his eyes focused on a flickering circuit. "Because I couldn't," he said simply. "I've seen enough people walk away when they shouldn't." "Were you a soldier?" she asked. He nodded faintly. "Once, during the War of Colonies, I fixed ships that were never coming back, and sometimes, people too." There was silence for a while, only the quiet hum of machines between them. Then he looked at her, his expression serious but kind. "Maybe this time, I can fix something that still has a future." Her eyes softened, her lips trembling slightly. "You speak with hope," she whispered. "That is rare among my people." "Then maybe your people forgot what hope feels like," Mason replied gently. Days passed. He built a small garden pod from spare parts, growing tiny green plants in recycled nutrient gel. It filled the air with faint oxygen and a smell that reminded him of Earth, of forests and rain. Alira would sit near it every day, breathing in its warmth. She began to tell him stories of her world, how her people once lived in floating crystal cities above oceans of light, how their laws became so rigid that love itself became a crime. Mason listened quietly, fixing a panel as she spoke. "Sounds like they traded freedom for pride," he said. "Yes," she replied sadly. "And I paid the price for remembering what love meant." That night, Mason heard her cry out, a sharp sound of pain that tore through the silence. He rushed to her side, finding her doubled over. Her skin glowed faintly as veins of blue light pulsed under her skin. "It's too soon," she gasped. "The child, it's coming too early." Mason grabbed the medkit, though he barely knew how to help an alien mother. "Stay with me," he said, his voice steady though his hands trembled. "You must leave," she whispered weakly. "If they find me here, they'll kill you too." "I don't care," Mason said. "You're not dying on my watch." He tried everything, stabilizing her temperature, adjusting oxygen flow, even using spare medical nanites to ease her pain. Hours passed like days. Then, a faint light filled the room. It came from her, from within her, glowing through her chest and hands. Mason stepped back in awe as the glow intensified, bathing the room in pure gold. "What's happening?" he asked, shielding his eyes. Alira's voice was soft, trembling. "My child is special. It carries something ancient, something my people feared." "What is it?" She smiled weakly, tears falling down her glowing cheeks. "Hope," she whispered. "They called it a curse, but it is life itself." Moments later, the light faded, and silence returned. Alira fell back against the pillow, her breathing shallow but calm. Mason checked her vitals. She was alive, and so was the small, glowing form now resting in her arms. A tiny infant, wrapped in a faint aura of light. Its eyes opened, deep silver, reflecting both human warmth and alien mystery. Mason couldn't speak. He had seen life and death many times, but never something like this. Alira smiled faintly. "She lives," she whispered, "against all odds." Mason nodded slowly, his throat tight. "She does," he said softly. "And so do you." Outside, in the distance, unseen sensors activated. The burst of energy from the birth had rippled through space like a flare. Far away, in the Valyrian command ship, alarms began to blink red. A commander turned toward his officers, eyes narrowing. "She is alive," he said coldly, "and a human helped her." Back at the outpost, Mason sat beside the sleeping mother and child. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but as he looked at them, fragile, peaceful, glowing with life, he made a silent promise. Whatever came, he would protect them, even if it meant standing against an entire galaxy. The stars outside the mining outpost shimmered quietly, hiding the storm that was coming. Inside, the small habitat had changed. Where there had once been silence and fear, now there was the soft hum of machines, the faint cry of a newborn, and the warmth of two souls learning to trust. Mason Holt sat by the doorway, holding a small data pad. He was tired but alert, scanning for any incoming signals. The baby slept in Alira's arms, glowing faintly with soft silver light. Each time the child moved, particles of light drifted like tiny fireflies in the air. It was beautiful and dangerous, because that light was a beacon, one that the Valyrian fleet could trace across half the galaxy. Alira looked down at her daughter and whispered something in her own language. Mason didn't understand the words, but he understood the feeling, love mixed with fear. You should rest, he said softly. You've barely slept in 2 days. She shook her head, her silver hair falling around her tired face. I can feel them, Mason, she said. They are searching, they know. Mason leaned back, trying to stay calm. I've scrambled the power grid, blocked outgoing signals. They won't find us easily. But even as he spoke, he didn't fully believe it. Far away, deep in space, the Valyrian command ship glided through the void like a silver blade. Inside, the High Warden of Exile stood before a massive holographic map. Trace the energy pulse, he ordered. Find the one who dared to defy our decree. The officers moved quickly, scanning the sector. One of them looked up, eyes wide. Sir, we have a match. Coordinates near the Terran mining belt. The warden smiled coldly. Prepare a hunter unit. We end this quietly. Back on the outpost, Mason worked on the defense systems. He wasn't a soldier anymore, but he still remembered how to fight. He rigged old mining drones to act as decoys and armed the docking tunnel with emergency charges. Every tool, every bolt, every piece of metal became part of his plan. When Aelira saw him working, she felt something stir inside her, something she hadn't felt since her exile. You fight for someone who is not even your kind, she said quietly. Mason looked up, sweat dripping down his face. Kindness doesn't care about kind, he replied. Later, as the stars dimmed into artificial night, Aelira placed the baby in a small cradle made of fabric Mason had torn from his old uniform. She should have a name, he said softly. Aelira smiled faintly. I will call her Leora, she said. It means light in the dark. That fits, Mason said, glancing at the faint glow that surrounded the sleeping child. She's a little star. Aelira looked at him, her eyes gentle. You are different, Mason Holt, she said. When my people spoke of humans, they said you were violent and crude, but I see something else, a heart that still remembers mercy. He smiled quietly. And I see a people who forgot it. Before she could answer, the radar lit up red. A piercing alarm echoed through the small outpost. Mason jumped to the console. 3 red dots appeared on the screen, closing in fast. Valyrian ships, he muttered. They found us. Aelira gasped, clutching Leora to her chest. They will destroy everything. Not if I can help it, Mason said, his voice firm. He activated the decoy drones. Small spherical machines launched from the outpost, scattering in different directions. The incoming ships slowed, confused by the sudden explosion of false signals. Mason used the moment to reroute power, masking their real position. He looked at Aelira. I'm going out there. No, she cried, standing weakly. You will be killed. He shook his head. If I stay here, we all die. I can draw them away. Before she could stop him, he grabbed his suit and helmet, sealing the hatch behind him. Outside, space was vast and silent. Mason maneuvered the small service pod toward the asteroid field, sending out false distress codes to lure the hunters. It worked. The 3 Valyrian ships turned, chasing him deeper into the debris field. Inside the outpost, Aelira held her child and watched through the small window, tears glowing on her cheeks. She whispered softly, May your stars protect him, little one, for he has become our light. The chase outside turned fierce. Flashes of plasma fire streaked across the darkness. Rocks exploded into shards. Mason dodged between the fragments, breathing hard. His pod shook violently, alarm screaming. One more hit, and it would break apart. He triggered the last charge, a burst of plasma that blinded the sensors of the enemy ships. Then he cut all power, drifting silently into the shadow of a massive asteroid. The Valyrians lost his trail, their scanners blinded by the radiation burst. After a long minute, they turned away, heading back toward the signal's origin. But by the time they returned, the outpost had gone dark. No heat, no life, no trace. Mason had turned everything off. Remotely, hiding Aelira and the baby completely, he floated there in silence, watching the ships vanish into the distance. His oxygen was low, his hands shaking, but he smiled. They'll never find you, he whispered, his voice fading into static. Back inside the outpost, a single light flickered on. Aelira felt it, his presence still somewhere nearby. She looked down at Leora, tears in her eyes. He saved us, she whispered. But now, I must save him. And as the stars burned quietly around her, a mother and her child prepared to repay a human's kindness with courage of their own. The outpost was silent again, but this time the silence felt heavy. Alira sat near the window, holding Leora close, staring into the endless void. Outside, tiny fragments of light drifted past like floating dust. Mason had gone hours ago, and there was still no signal. Her heart told her he was alive, but her fear whispered otherwise. Leora slept peacefully, glowing softly in her arms. The faint light from the child's skin flickered in rhythm with her heartbeat. Every pulse released a gentle hum, a vibration that filled the air like the song of a star. Alira had never seen anything like it. She knew her daughter was not just Valyrian. She was something more, something born between two worlds. When Mason had risked his life to save them, he had done it without promise or reason. He had done it because his heart couldn't walk away. Now, she couldn't either. She stood, wrapping Leora in a blanket of thermal fabric, and whispered softly, "Stay strong, little one. We are going to bring him back." She activated the outpost's console, rerouting minimal power to the scanners. A weak trace appeared, faint but familiar. Mason's ship beacon, drifting near the asteroid belt. Her fingers trembled, but her voice was calm. "Hold on, Mason Holt," she whispered. "I am coming." The escape pod she used was old, slow, and unstable. Its engines hummed unevenly, shaking with every pulse. But Alira knew how to pilot. Once, long ago, before her exile, she had been a navigator among the stars. She secured Leora in the small seat beside her and launched from the outpost. The stars streaked across the window as they moved into open space. Minutes turned into hours. She scanned every corner of the asteroid field, calling his name through the comms. "This is Alira. Mason, can you hear me?" Only static replied. Then, finally, a faint sound, a weak cough, followed by his voice. "Alira? Is that you?" Tears welled in her eyes. "Yes. Mason, I found your signal. Where are you?" "Pod, damaged," he said weakly. "Power's gone, oxygen's low." She followed the beacon's trail until she saw it. A small dark shape lodged between two massive rocks. The pod's surface was burned, its lights flickering. Alira maneuvered carefully, docking beside it. When the hatch opened, cold air rushed in, and Mason was there, pale, unconscious, barely breathing. She pulled him into her pod, her hands trembling but steady. "Mason, open your eyes," she whispered. "Don't leave me now." He stirred weakly, his lips cracked and dry. "You came back," he murmured. "Of course I did," she said. "You saved me. Now I save you." As she worked to stabilize his oxygen, the child in her arms began to glow brighter. The soft hum filled the cabin again, stronger this time. The light spread across the pod walls, wrapping Mason's body in warmth. Alira froze, watching in awe. His breathing steadied, color returned to his face. He opened his eyes fully, confused. What happened?" Alira looked at the child, her voice shaking. "She healed you. Mason, she gave you her energy." He stared at the small, glowing infant, amazement in his tired eyes. "She's incredible," he said softly. Alira nodded, tears of joy streaming down her face. "She is hope, the hope my people feared." Before they could rest, the radar flashed again. 2 red blips, Valyrian interceptors, closing in. "They found us," Mason said, forcing himself upright. Alira tightened her grip on the controls. "Not this time," she whispered. She steered the pod through the asteroid field, weaving between fragments of rock. Mason joined her, though weak, helping to balance power and navigation. The Valyrian ships fired plasma bursts, each one lighting up the dark. But every time they neared, Leora's glow intensified. A pulse of light radiated outward, and their scanners glitched, their targeting systems went blind. Mason's eyes widened. "She's jamming them. She's protecting us." Alira's voice was full of wonder. "She's more powerful than I ever imagined." The pod dived behind a massive asteroid, engines burning low. The Valyrian ships overshot, confused by false readings. For now, they were safe again. Inside, Mason looked at her. "You risked everything to save me," he said softly. She smiled weakly, brushing frost from his cheek. "You taught me what it means to care. I could not lose the one who gave me that." The silence that followed was peaceful. Leora slept again, her glow fading to a gentle shimmer. Mason rested his head back, exhaustion finally catching up to him. Alira watched him quietly, her heart heavy yet calm. She knew the chase wasn't over. The Valyrians would not stop. Not until she and her child were gone forever. But as she looked at the two beings who had defied the laws of her world, one human, one child of light, she felt something greater than fear. She felt destiny. And in that quiet pod drifting through the stars, she whispered, "Let them come, for this time. I will not run." The silence of space never lasted long. After days of drifting through the asteroid belt, Mason's small pod had finally reached the shadow side of a dying moon. It was quiet, hidden, perfect for rest, or so they thought. Alira sat beside Mason, watching the stars through the cracked viewport. Her eyes reflected the starlight, calm yet full of worry. Leora slept between them, her faint silver glow pulsing softly. Mason's arm was wrapped in a bandage, his face pale but determined. He had survived only because of Leora's strange gift. Now he owed them both his life. "You should sleep," Alira said gently. He smiled faintly, shaking his head. "I'll rest when we're far from this system." "You never rest," she said softly. "Maybe I forgot how," he replied, his eyes still fixed on the controls. Suddenly, the radar flashed red. Mason's heart dropped. Before he could react, the pod jolted violently, the hull groaning under pressure. A tractor beam had locked onto them. "They found us," Alira whispered, clutching Leora close. Mason slammed his fists on the console. "No, not now." Through the window, a massive shadow appeared. A Valyrian warship, its black surface glinting with crimson lights. The voice that followed was cold and sharp. "Unidentified human vessel. You are harboring a criminal of the Valyrian Empire. Surrender immediately." Mason looked at Alira. Her face was pale, but her eyes were calm. "They will kill you if they see you protecting me," she said. He smirked bitterly. "Then they'll have to explain why a human is harder to kill than a god." Moments later, the pod was pulled into the warship's hangar. Armed guards surrounded them instantly, tall, silver-skinned soldiers with glowing eyes and emotionless faces. Alira was dragged to her knees, Mason forced against the wall. Leora began to cry, her glow flickering like a small candle in the dark. The High Warden himself stepped forward, his long cloak sweeping the metal floor. "So it's true," he said, his voice full of disgust. "You defied your exile and carried that abomination to term." Alira lifted her chin. "She is not an abomination," she said quietly. "She is life." The Warden's eyes narrowed. "Your kind was forbidden from breeding past the age of cycles. Your actions insult the purity of our line." Mason struggled against his captors, his voice loud and furious. "You talk about purity while leaving a mother to die? You call that honor?" The Warden turned his gaze to him. "A human dares to speak of honor?" he said mockingly. "You interfere with what you cannot comprehend." "I understand enough," Mason said coldly. "She was alone, and you abandoned her. That's all I need to know." The soldiers moved closer, weapons raised. Alira cried out, "Please no." But before the order could be given, a bright flash erupted from where Leora lay. The child's cry turned into a vibration that filled the entire chamber. Energy burst outward, pure light, soft yet blinding. The soldiers stumbled back, their armor sparking. The Warden shielded his face, shouting, "What is this power?" Mason grabbed Alira's hand, pulling her close as the light spread through the air like a wave. It wasn't just light, it was memory. Images flickered in the air. Alira's exile, Mason's rescue, their shared pain, their defiance. Everyone in the room saw it. Every act of kindness, every heartbeat of compassion, all laid bare before them. Even the soldiers froze, their expressions softening, confusion replacing obedience. Leora's glow intensified until the metal walls began to hum. Machines flickered, scanners went blind, and the warship's engines failed. The High Warden fell to one knee, clutching his head as the energy passed through him. His voice trembled. "What is she?" Alira whispered softly, tears in her eyes. "She is the bridge between what you fear and what you forgot. She carries both human spirit and Valyrian soul." The light began to fade, leaving silence in its wake. One by one, the soldiers lowered their weapons. Mason stood there, breathless, staring at the child in awe. "She saved us again," he said softly. Alira nodded, holding Leora close. "No," she whispered. "She saved them too." For a moment, even the warden couldn't speak. He looked at the child, her tiny hands glowing faintly, her face calm, and he saw something ancient and pure, something his laws had long forgotten. Then the alarms began again, the ship's power failing, life support collapsing. Mason turned to Alira, urgency in his eyes. "We have to go." She nodded, clutching Leora as they ran toward the damaged hangar. The soldiers didn't stop them. They only watched, silent, unsure what they had just witnessed. As the small escape pod launched into the stars, Alira looked back one last time. The great Valyrian ship flickered in the distance, powerless but alive. For the first time in centuries, her people had seen the truth, not through words, but through light. And in that light, the legend of a human's kindness had already begun to spread across the stars. The escape pod drifted silently through the vast darkness of space. Inside, Alira held Leora close, her small body glowing softly against the dim light of the cabin. Mason sat beside them, exhausted but alive. The hum of the pod's engines was a gentle rhythm, a heartbeat in the quiet. For the first time in days, they were free, but freedom was fragile, temporary. Alira looked out the viewport, staring at a cluster of distant planets bathed in soft blue and green light. "Could one of these worlds be our home?" she whispered. Mason's eyes followed hers, hope and exhaustion mixing in his gaze. "Maybe," he said, "somewhere no one will judge us, no one will hunt us." Leora stirred in her arms, her glow pulsing brighter. She looked up at Mason, her tiny silver eyes reflecting stars like a galaxy trapped in a single gaze. Alira smiled, tears running down her face. "She is more than I imagined. Her light, it can heal, it can protect." Mason reached out and brushed a strand of silver hair from her face. "She already saved us more times than I can count," he said softly. "And maybe, she can save more than just us someday." They drifted through the asteroid belt in silence. The stars seemed endless, stretching into infinity. Alira thought of her past, the cold halls of the station, the exile, the cruel laws of her people. And then she thought of Mason, of his hands, his courage, his unwavering heart. And she knew that somewhere in the galaxy, kindness could survive even the darkest places. Suddenly, the pod sensors picked up a faint energy signal. It was not hostile. It was gentle, luminous, familiar. Leora's glow reacted, pulsing in rhythm with the signal. "Her power, it's leading us," Alira whispered, a mixture of awe and fear in her voice. Mason leaned over the console, scanning the coordinates. "It looks like a planet," he said slowly. "A small, habitable world uncharted." Alira's heart lifted, hope blossoming where fear had once lived. This could be our chance," she said. "A place to live, to teach her, to be safe." As the pod approached the planet, clouds of blue and green swirled below. Rivers sparkled like threads of silver. Forests stretched endlessly, untouched by war or cruelty. They landed in a quiet valley, soft grass cushioning the pod as if welcoming them. Mason opened the hatch and stepped onto the planet, the smell of fresh air filling his lungs. Alira followed, holding Leora close, feeling the warmth of the sun, not the dying stars of their exile, but life itself, real and vibrant. For a long moment, they simply stood there, breathing, feeling the wind, listening to the rustle of leaves and the call of strange birds. The silence was no longer cold. It was alive, full of possibility. Leora looked around with her glowing eyes, her tiny hands reaching out to touch the soft grass. Her light spread gently over the land, bending toward the trees, the rivers, the sky. It was as if her power recognized the goodness here, the safety, the hope. Mason knelt beside Alira, taking her hand. "We did it," he said softly. "We survived, and she survived." Alira nodded, tears of relief streaming down her cheeks. "And she will grow up in a world that believes in life, not punishment," she whispered. Mason smiled faintly, looking at the child. "She is a miracle, a bridge between our worlds," he said. Alira looked at him, her eyes reflecting the first warmth she had felt in months. And so is your kindness, she replied. Mason's lips curved into a small, tired smile. I just did what anyone should do, he said. I protected life. They stood together on the soft grass, watching the sun rise over the horizon. A new world, a new beginning, a future free from exile, cruelty, and fear. For the first time, Illyra allowed herself to hope fully. Leora's light pulsed gently in her arms, a heartbeat in the quiet. And somewhere deep in the stars, the echoes of their story began to spread. Of a human who dared to help, of an alien mother who refused to give up, and of a child whose light reminded the galaxy what it meant to be alive. The past was behind them, the dangers far away. In front of them stretched a universe of endless possibilities. And in that moment, under the bright sky of a new world, Illyra, Mason, and Leora knew the most important truth of all. Kindness survives, even in the darkest corners of space. Hope shines brighter than fear. And life always finds a way.